We told you about a 9-year-old Indiana boy who apparently was doing some very shocking things, so much so that exorcism was involved.
What would you do if your child climbed a hospital wall? Not in a horror movie, not in a church during an exorcism, but inside a brightly lit medical room surrounded by nurses, social workers, and a uniformed police officer. No dramatic music, no shadows, just fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. And then later, that officer sits down and signs his name to a report stating he witnessed something he cannot explain. In 2011, in the city of Gary, a family claimed their home was possessed by more than 200 demons. Stories like that usually fade quickly. They're dismissed as exaggeration, stress, or a desperate cry for attention. But this one did not disappear, because it did not stay inside the house. It followed them into a hospital. It crossed into official documentation. And once something is written in a police report, it stops being just a campfire story. The woman at the center of this case was Latoya Ammons, a single mother of 3. November of 2011, she moved her family into a modest rental home on Carolina Street in Gary. It was not a mansion. It was not some isolated farmhouse in the woods. It was a small house in a struggling Midwestern city. Ordinary, quiet, forgettable. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The family unpacked. The kids chose their rooms. Life continued. But within weeks, small things began to feel off. Thick clusters of black flies gathered around the porch and screen door. It was December. Freezing temperatures. Flies should not have been alive, let alone swarming. Exterminators were called. They found no nest, no dead animal, no explanation. Then came the sounds. Heavy footsteps pacing in the basement at night. Doors creaking open after being shut. Whispering voices that seemed to drift down from the hallway. Latoya claimed her children began behaving differently. Her 12-year-old daughter would slip into sudden trances. Her eyes would roll back. She would speak in a deep voice that did not sound like her own. The 9-year-old began growling, sometimes snarling at family members. The youngest would sit and stare into empty corners for long stretches of time, as if watching someone no one else could see. Family members reported seeing one of the girls levitate above her bed, not floating gently, lifting, as if pulled upward by invisible hands. They claimed she landed hard, shaking and unresponsive. At other times, the children would black out and wake up with no memory of what they'd said or done. The aggression escalated. There were threats. There were violent outbursts. At one point, the young boy allegedly lunged at his grandmother, baring his teeth and speaking in a voice that witnesses described as inhuman. Teachers noticed bruises and erratic behavior at school. Concerned, they contacted authorities. Child Protective Services opened an investigation. From that moment on, the story stopped being confined to family testimony. Caseworkers visited the house. Police officers responded to reports. Medical professionals became involved, and several of them would later admit that something about that home unsettled them. One Department of Child Services employee claimed that after visiting the house, her car began malfunctioning repeatedly. Another said she felt an unseen hand press against her while she stood inside. A police officer reported his radio experiencing static interference near the property. The basement, according to multiple visitors, felt oppressive, heavy, like the air itself was thick. Even those who did not believe in demons admitted the environment felt wrong. In April 2012, the family was taken to a local hospital for psychological evaluations. Doctors initially suspected trauma, stress, or possible abuse. The children were separated and interviewed individually, but during one of those evaluations, something happened that shifted the entire case. According to official reports, while speaking with a case manager, the 9-year-old boy began growling. His eyes rolled back into his head. he showed his teeth and said, "It's time to die." Then, in front of medical staff and a police officer, he allegedly lifted himself and walked backward up the wall. Not scrambled, not climbed, walked. His feet pressed flat against the surface as his body moved upward, parallel to the floor. Witnesses stated he reached the ceiling height, flipped over, and landed on his feet. The officer present was Captain Charles Austin of the Gary Police Department, a veteran with decades of experience, not someone known for dramatic claims. He later signed a report describing what he saw. He stated he had never witnessed anything like it in his career. The hospital room did not have cameras recording the moment. There is no video. Only testimonies. Multiple adults, including trained professionals, claiming the same impossible event occurred. After the hospital incident, the case intensified. LaToya insisted the home was infested with demonic spirits. A psychic was brought in and claimed more than 200 entities occupied the property. 3 exorcisms were performed. The final ritual reportedly lasted hours. Religious officials involved said the atmosphere in the home shifted during prayers. Some claimed objects moved. Others described sudden temperature drops. Skeptics argue the entire case can be explained through psychological stress, suggestion, and environmental factors. They suggest the children may have suffered from emotional trauma, that fear and attention amplified behaviors, that adults misinterpreted what they saw in a tense situation. There is no video proof of levitation. No scientific evidence of demons. But supporters of the case point to the paperwork, the signed reports, the consistency between witness statements. They ask why multiple trained professionals would describe the same impossible act. They question why the children's behavior stabilized almost immediately after leaving the house. No more blackouts, no more violent growling, no more threats. Eventually, the family moved out permanently. The house stood vacant. Neighbors avoided it. In 2014, the property was demolished. Some believe tearing it down was an attempt to erase the stigma. Others believe it was simply an abandoned structure with too much unwanted attention. The Ammons case remains one of the most unsettling modern possession claims in America because it does not rely on folklore or centuries-old legend. It happened in the age of smartphones and paperwork. It involved government agencies and hospital staff. It crossed from private fear into public record. Whether the events were caused by psychological factors, environmental toxins, mass hysteria, or something far darker, one moment continues to echo through this case. A child walking backward up a wall in a hospital room. Witnessed, documented, filed. If you'd been standing there, watching it happen under fluorescent lights, what would you have believed? Would you trust your eyes? Or would you convince yourself there had to be another explanation? The Demon House of Gary forces that question because sometimes the most terrifying stories are not the ones told in the dark. They're the ones written down in official ink. Thank you for watching the Lost Tapes 404. Remember, some files were never meant to be found. Stay curious, stay cautious. Good night.